This is Dirshu Mishna Berurah as we continue learning Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah, beginning a new Siman Kof Lamed Ches, that the Mechaber coins Shaloi L'Shayer B'Parsha Pachos Mishleish Psukim, a din that we've touched upon over the past few Simanim, and now we're going to see it properly, that you're never allowed to conclude a laning less than 3 psukim left. And let's see what this means. Says the Mechaber in Sifal, someone who reads in the Torah, can I leave over less than 3 psukim? Because someone who might leave shul, such a person that leaves shul is going to think, as we turn over the page over there, the person who got the aliyah after him, only read the final 2 psukim. And similarly, you cannot begin less than 3 psukim. Why? Someone who comes in late, they're going to think so fascinating halacha that we take into account one who leaves early, one who comes late. Perhaps we might have thought, what do you mean? Well, we have to be worried about a guy who leaves laning early, comes late. But we see clearly this comes straight from the Gemara and Megillah that yes, we have to be aware, and therefore you cannot leave over 3 psukim to the end of a parsha. As we'll see what it means. Parsha means a pei and samach in the Sefer Torah, and nor can you begin less than 3 psukim. Says the Rama, ve'ein chelik bein parsha psuchel l'stum. It doesn't make a difference if it's open or it's closed, whether it's a pei or a samach. Uparsha sheino rak shnei psukim. A parsha only has 3 psukim. Motel l'shar b'tzchil afsik sham. Then you're allowed to leave over and to be mafsik there. And what you have in mind, you always want to begin in a good place in the laning, conclude at a good place. So that is Sif Aleph, and that's really the entirety of Siman Kov Lamed Ches. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatan Aleph Lo Yeshayer Hainu Shli Yisayim. You should conclude L'Shum Echad Me'elim Any the Aliyah Some Glass Chos HaParsha near the beginning of a Parsha Achra for the next Parsha Pachos Migimel Psukim. Why? Because someone who leaves Bain, someone who's going to be leaving between the Aliyos. Let's just, as we scroll through over here, let's just look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and as well, if we find a mistake in the Sefer Torah, we're going to see in Kuf Mem Gimel the name of the Rama, that if there's a Tayi Shnei Psukim Samach LeParsha Yigmar Kriyas of Sefer HaKosher Ad HaParsha. Again, you always conclude to the end. You never want to stop with 3 psukim left, even if it's an unavoidable mistake, as that's what the Dirshu is pointing out from later on. The Sefer Torah had a mistake, but even in that scenario, you never leave over less than 3 psukim. Bein Gavra LeGavra, someone might leave it and Leah's back to Mishnah Berurah. She is Beru. She says she correct shape psukim, and they're going to think that the next Aliyah was only 2 psukim out of Parsha. Parsha Ainu Psucha Istuma. What is a Parsha when it's open or closed? Lo Masha Oilim Karin Parsha the Ainu Sheni V'Shlishi. Not Aliyos, what we colloquially call Aliyos Risha Sheni Shlishi. No, Vutayis Gomer. Parsha means when the Torah has a pei or a samech, when either there's a space of a few letters, you have a block of a space, or you have a space at the end of the line in the Torah. V'yizbru Laimar, they're going to think Shematar Akriya Afilu Bachas Ben Gimel Psukim. You're allowed a lane even less than 3 psukim. Let's say you made this mistake, you left over 2 psukim and you made the bracha afterwards. If it's the end of a top, this is we've seen. Like when you lane for Yom Tiv, then what do? Go back 1 pasuk so that the next person at least lanes 3, because there's always 2 issues. There's that you finish less than 3 and you're starting less than 3. But let's say you did not finish the topic, then you do not go back 1 pasuk. Ella Yaschal Likros Yimakar Shesim, you go back for the place that you ended. Ha'ila Shalafan of the Aliyah before it. V'yikra Oisat Shnei Psukim, then you lay in 2 psukim. V'ayis Leisha Psukim. Oyayiser B'Parsha Shalachra, or more from the next parsha. It continues Mishnah Berurah Sivkat and Beis. That what's the other issue that we have to contend with? V'chein lo yaschel. As well, you do not want to start with less than 3 psukim. Says Mishnah Berurah, Dahainu, shlo yisayim arisha shnei psukim achar parsha, 2 psukim left in the next parsha. Tim kein yasla sheni shnei psukim achar parsha. That's where he's going to start. V'yoimru anechnasim, and anyone who comes late is going to think, ben gaver le gaver, shezeh shekar lefonav lo kar el shnei psukim. He's going to think that the previous person only laid 2 psukim shem arisha parsha ad kan. V'ein chelik b'chol zeh. There's no difference. Whether it's the 7 ikra aliyos, whether it's an extra achra, and it's the same halach. I'm after here. Let's say a parsha ends with 5 psukim, should not lane 2 or 3 psukim, 3 psukim. Even if the previously laned the same 5 psukim yachalachs of likros and suddenly karla maftir. And now we can understand why sometimes when it comes to maftir, you might wonder why sometimes is it additional and sometimes it's just repetitive, and this is, well, maftir is always repetitive, I should say, but why sometimes I guess is shavi just the maftir depending on how many aliyahs. We call makam emisla maftir. Even though we did not say the latter bracha, that would be enough. And what is the reason for this din? Because those who might come late, if the first person late, and he left over 2 psuk, you should not start. We don't have to be worried. This is all a din lechatchila. But if a mistake was made, a mistake was made. We're not concerned. Why not? The chol shein royin. Shina loichai shina. If they don't see something strange, we're not worried. The dafke minach shnei psukim bebarsha shemisayim ba. Only if you leave over 2 psukim in the parsha that you're concluding with. Zavi shina, you may be chshad. Someone's going to get confused. Think you didn't lay in the requisite amount. Masha inkin kshegoimer a parsha shaimir ba. Ein kan shinu. So if you complete the actual parsha, then there is less of a concern. Vuadin says the Mishnah Berurah, Shemota likra parsha azais b'tzeir mashkolav and ha'lasik. You could go back and then stop afterwards. Lo chashin shemir manchasam achar shloi kara la parsha azais. We don't worry that people are going to think you only lay in this parsha b'vad shishnei psukim. The davka ba'alma demafsik b'emsa parsha chashin diyor manchasam shemsam lo kara ela shnei psukim. When you stop in the middle of a parsha, that's when we're worried. Dilava achi lama kara la'alon lo sim b'gemara parsha. Masha enkein achad de be'emes sim b'gemara parsha. You did conclude, then because you stopped in the right place, even though it's going to get messed up afterwards, there's nothing to worry about. But says the Mishnah Berurah, some say we should not do this. Because in that lane there's only 2 psukim. And then Parsha Kitan, anytime you have a small Parsha. Kasam Magen Avraham in a Parsha, he be'emsa pasik, Kigon B'tchilas Parsha Pichos, pasik v'yachar yama geifa, shish piska be'emsa pasik, the pasik in a pasik, motel esayim b'pasik asam b'chlai, she'chashet she'yitin she'yomru she'ola achrav l'ikra rak ad a piska, achu, no one's going to think they're only laying to that stop. She'kol yodim she'im esayim be'emsa pasik, everyone knows that, you don't stop in the middle of a pasik, afal pi, she'esh sham Parsha. And we said you're always going to conclude, begin with the davar toiv, sevkot and eish Yisrael, the toivas akom inoy karu toiva, v'chein lini and the sayim b'davar ra, we don't end on a low note. Hainu shal Yisrael means 4 klal Yisrael. Kaz b'ziv chasinu sevim tav shenal. Ayin Yizayir achazin shal yikol mishu iver. Should not lane for someone who's blind. The pisech parshas averos a shavar. Should not give them that parsha. Oil misha oisha netak parshas netakav lo karu misha chashan al rayus. But parshas rayus chaybichol davar. You never want to give someone an aliyah that someone's going to suspect. That's why you're giving him the aliyah. In the chazan lachshal davarich achar echad b'shas brachos or the kal b'shas shekar nachlalos. Chazan should not think that one person should get the brachas and one person should get the klolos. Vatam, sarosh kavanas likros ba'atayra lishma. You don't have any other machshavi. Same different time, and the same misha oisem ma'isera. And of course, as we've already mentioned, and we're realizing again, this is really more relevant in a world in which there were no set aliyos, and rather each one had decided on their own where to stop. However, nowadays, of course, we know that we have all the aliyos taking care of us. It's much less of an issue. We said lechatchila. One should be chayshish. So Dirshu number 3 over here points out, minagenu b'tayin sibur coming off of a shartzia and Shabbos Chol Hamoed l'sayim pasuk la'achar aliyah. You finish that pasuk. As well, we said this implies to maftir. Says the Dirshu number 4, quoting the Magen Avraham, even though everyone knows that maftir is rereading the psukim already read, still, since at the time of the Gemara, the maftir would begin from where the previous person ended, loy batla takana. So again, interesting reason, because we know maftir is not one of the shiva kriyim. Maftir is being added on. So why are we worrying about maftir at all? So Dirshu, according to the Magen Avraham, teaches one of two reasons. Either because bisman chazal, the maftir would actually read something new, so once we had the takana, it continued. Or the reason is that maybe one's not going to know it is a maftir. Similarly, Dirshu number 6 points out, not similarly, another din, we don't end on a low note, brings the Magen Avraham this din, that which the Shulchan Aruch brings later on in Tov Kov Sadi Hey, that we don't say in Rosh Hashanah, Psukim Malchus, Echronis, and Shayfer, Sheish Ben Parani, Shal Yisrael, Umavor, Shem Yish Ben Parani, Shal Umas Ha'olam, then it would be a different story. And the Chazan should be careful, we don't give someone blind who's blind. It's a different Siman, the Dirshu points out. What's the reason? We don't want to embarrass the guy. If you give the blind person such an aliyah, or the lame person such an aliyah, or the one who's chash and aray such an aliyah, it causes him embarrassment. But says the Dirshu number 9, so we know that was over a certain avera, says that Rav in the name of the Kesed is Gdol, calls man shel shavet tshuva. If he didn't do tshuva, then the opposite, you should give it to him, because you should be embarrassing him, so he does tshuva. And of course, this is not something that we necessarily take matters into our own hands nowadays. But a mummer and someone who's rugged to do avera, he says, do not give him an aliyah at all. And the words of Ignace is Gedol, only someone who knows what he's doing and just won't do tshuva. And we already mentioned that this might be different to mummer lahachis, mummer l'te'avain, etc. And finally, we'll conclude with Dirshu note number 10. Says the Sefer Chasidim, Kivan yavshe shi'amoid ruvain v'yomer arshav chameshes aviv. If he's one that did the avera, shma mina shleichata. And therefore, this is why we have to be very careful in each and everything that we don't. We have to be careful who we give the aliyahs to. And finally, it says a fascinating anhaga of the Chassam Sofer. His Rabbi Rav Nosson Adler would not call to the Torah b'yantav of Sigas aliyahs Levi. So who's on nizar b'isar chadash. Bizman hazeh, we know Bizman hazeh, not everyone is on Chadash and Yashan. Of course, it is definitely the right thing to do, but it's something that not everyone has done, certainly in Chutz La'aretz. So says the Chassam Sofer from his Rabbi, be careful, don't give that person aliyah of Chadash, because he gets the aliyah of Lechem V'Kol V'Karmel L'Soichlu, and that time he himself could potentially be eating it. It's again the same level of embarrassment. However, Rav Pais came out and said, Chadash is the right, so should be careful. And therefore, and again, what we're seeing is we have to be extra sensitive that we're not going to give someone a aliyah to something that he might himself be faulty with. We'll pick it up from Siman Kuf Lamed Tes the next year, B'siyata Dishmayo.